Vincent Skipperfield. Before we start, I'd like to get to know a bit who I'm talking to. So please raise your hand if you have developed in JavaScript for more than 2 years. Okay. Raise your hand if you've worked a bit with JavaScript, but not so much. That's good. And so all the rest are either not developers or not with JavaScript. So please bear with me. It's going to be very technical. We are going to read a lot of codes. It's going to be fun. My name is Vincent Skipperfield. I don't know if I said that already. I worked in the JavaScript framework team. What I'd like you to remember today is that it's not possible to teach you asynchronous programming in 15 minutes. However, I can show you a few pitfalls that we see all the time in code reviews and during trainings, and also how to fix them. Then I'll show you a few primitives that we have created in Odoo a long time ago and that you can use everywhere in your code so that you can avoid a lot of asynchronous issues. So, asynchronous in JavaScript means promises. Promise is a pure JavaScript object. It has nothing to do with Odoo, but we use it everywhere. So just for the reminder, just so we're all clear, this is the syntax that you use to create a promise. You create a new object, a new promise. It takes a function as parameter. That function itself has 2 functions as parameter to complete the promise, either successfully or not. You can wait for promises using the then keyword, and the then takes a function as parameter as well. That function receives the result of the promise. There's 2 syntax to wait, actually. One is with the then, and the second one that is newer is using the await keyword in combination with the async keyword. You can handle errors on promises using the catch keyword, and it takes a function as parameter also. If you use newer syntax, you can use try and catch to await its promise that will also catch errors. There's one Odoo specific thing that we have created, and we have called that guarded catch. It's some kind of a catch that will only catch when the promises are resolved in a failed state, but without error. I'll explain that again at the end of the talk, because I know it's a bit hard, all those things. But remember, guarded catch exists, and it's defined on promise. There's 2 more things that you can do in promise with promises. One is wait for multiple promises with promise.all and takes an array of promise. And the second one is wait for the first completed promise and then discard the rest, and that's promise.trace. Okay, so this should be familiar. Most of you are JavaScript developers, so I'm not spending too much time on that. I'm going to set up a small use case. There's here 3 different ways to write exactly the same code. So the first on the top is the longest way I could make it. Every function is named, or almost every function is named. Basically, it's a public API. It returns a promise. That public API calls, makes an AJAX call, an RPC call. Because it's using jQuery, which does not give you a promise, I turn it into a promise using a new promise and then and catch. And that's it. That's the only code that this does. You can see that the shortest way in the bottom with async await is very concise, which is very good, of course. So this is the asynchronous part, the thing that you start and then eventually will complete. And what you want to do is, when you start, get a ticket to be notified for when it will be completed. That's my public API, the thing I want to call from the outside, and that should return a promise, and I call it do something async. And of course, all the 3 different syntaxes return the promise. Even in the bottom, you can see I tag the function with the async keyword. And that means that it will always return a promise. No matter what I do, it will always return a promise. So I told you asynchronous, start something, but let's see in details what happens step by step in the code, the JavaScript interpreter, what will do. So it has to load a file. Here it starts in line 2. It defines a function. Well, okay, the JavaScript interpreter reads the function, parse the code. If there's no mistake, it will continue. The very next thing that happens is not execute the body of the function. It's the next line. We have defined it. So the next line is do something async, which calls the function. So we enter the function, do something async. The first thing it does is declare a variable, which is a new promise. And when you do that, immediately after the body of the promise, what is inside what we call the executor, the function here that takes the two parameters, execute. So it executes its first line, which is $.ajax, and we all know this starts a asynchronous call, RPC call. Okay, then we say when this call is done, you will resolve it, resolve the promise, and if there is an error, you will reject the promise. So this resolve and reject are functions, if you remember. They are not executed right now. All we do is say, I will register this then and register this catch on this $.ajax, which is not a promise, it's a deferred. And when this will be done, I will execute this function. And if there is an error, I will execute this function. Resolve and reject, mark the promise as completed. Next thing that happens, we return the promise. So that's your ticket to be notified when the thing that you're waiting for is done. Okay? Next thing that happens, well, that's weird, right? You said, I wanted to do something asynchronous, and this function is called do something after asynchronous. But there's no guarantee that whatever was asynchronous is done. All I have was a ticket to be notified when it will be done. So here, there's a bug. We put that in the category of asynchronous issues or undeterministic issues, because actually, we will only be ready to do something after async when the resolve function is called. And that will be only done when the RPC from the $.ajax is completed. So this code is buggy. And how we fix that is one of two ways. Either we await for the promise of do something async, and the other way to do that is with the older syntax. Do something async returns a promise that we can call .then on, and so it will execute do something after async, exactly as I said, after the async call is done. So let's do it once again slowly. Initially, that's weird. Initially, the function do something async is declared. Then we call it. The first thing it does is when you enter the function is declare a variable, my promise, and execute its body. The body starts $.ajax, gives you a ticket when it will be done. The ticket will be resolved when the resolve function is called, or unsuccessfully resolved when the reject function will be called. You return the ticket to the caller. Eventually, the function resolved will be called when the RPC is done. And only then, do something after async will be called either the old syntax or new syntax. All right, so we have fixed the bug. Now, we expected something to happen after the RPC is done, and it actually happens after the RPC is done. Okay. This is not Odoo specific. This is pure JavaScript. Now, let's start to do something very much Odoo specific. I've created a widget, and a very simple widget. It has a template, and I want to load this template asynchronously. Of course, I've read the documentation about widgets, and I know that I should do asynchronous stuff in the will start method of the widget. I'm sure you all read the documentation and all know that you should do asynchronous stuff in the will start function of the widget, right? Sure. So I run this code, and this is what I get. Very nice traceback. I don't know if you can read it, but the error itself is called template first async template not found. Okay. Any idea why? Give you a few seconds to read the code. Okay, if you found the bug, raise your hands. 1, 2. People from my team are cheating. Okay, I'll tell you. The function ajax.loads.xml, well, it's asynchronous. So likely you need to wait for it to be done before you let the template continue rendering, right? This widget to render needs these templates, but here, when the wheel starts, it only starts the downloading of the file. You're not waiting for it. So in order to fix this, what you need to do is save the ticket to be notified, this promise, into a variable. Here I call it prom, and wait for it. Super is the function that calls the wheel start of your parent, and because you should do asynchronous stuff in the wheel start, you also know it returns a promise, so you should also wait for it. So in this case, I waited for both of them. This is not the only solution. You could have said, I want my support to be called first, and then wait for the Ajax load XML to be completed, but I think this is fine. All right, that's another example, and it's pretty funny. That's an example I saw earlier this week during the training about JavaScript. That's one of the students. He created a new widget in this file. That's a complete file. His idea was, I want to put my widget on the page. It contains hello world, and all I think I want to do is have that, because then I know my files are in the correct place and everything is registered correctly. So he did that. Pretty simple template. Here it's not asynchronous, it's static. So we don't need to wait for its template. He created an instance of this widget and tried to append the widget into an element that had the ID somewhere in his DOM, and the element was there in his DOM. So when he ran that code, nothing happened. He couldn't see hello world. Once again, it's an asynchronous issue, but this time we don't even see a promise happening. There is nothing to wait for, no then to put anywhere. So what do you think is wrong? Yes, indeed. Good. So what happens is, when Odoo starts, it will execute all the Odoo.define functions to register all the widgets. So it does that at the very beginning, before the DOM is ready, before the session is ready, before most RPC calls or during RPC calls. So here we define, we require a widget, so we put a dependency on widget. We create a new widget class which extends widget, and immediately after, before anything on the page is ready, maybe before the rest of the code is ready, we try to append it in the DOM. Of course, this cannot work. So this shows a very subtle way asynchronous programming is complicated. Here, there's no promise to wait. The only thing that you have is the knowledge that Odoo and in general most web applications have a startup time during which you can do some things like create the definition of new widgets, but you can't instantiate them. Or if you do, they will not really be alive until the DOM is ready and all the dependencies are loaded. So how do we fix this? Well, we do it the Odoo way. Here he had an action, a client action or abstract action, I don't remember. And I literally told him, just create your widget in the start of your action. Then you know, because your action is started, the startup of your complete Odoo is done. So you can register, you can start your widget and you can append it then to the DOM. And of course, don't forget to wait for the promises. Once again, there's nothing to await here, no promises. You have to know that Odoo starts in multiple phases, and the time you register the widgets is not the time to create them. Okay, so those were really simple examples. Simple in terms of line of code and not simple in terms of the problems. But now I want to go a bit deeper and create more complicated problems. So I've created a widget, I call it master detail. The master part is here. It's a list of whatever you want, a list of records. They have an ID and a name. If you click on one of them, it will update its details here on the right side. To do that, it needs to do an RPC call. And finally, you have a button, Open Details, which will open this record in the form view with all the full details available. And of course, there's RPC calls to be done for that too. So here's a shortened version of the code. As you can see, we define a widget. This one is anonymous. We have a template. It's a static template. No need to wait for something that loads it. I define 2 events on that template. If you click on a row of the table, we need to update the details on the right side. If you click on the button on the right side, it opens you a new action with the details of the record in from view. So this is a shortened version of the code. This time, I didn't forget the await. So bad luck if you expected to catch me on that. But there's still some issues. So there are 2 ways people have to wait for things to happen. And what happens if a user clicks on a row and immediately after clicks on the button show detail? So if you have a really slow network, it might be a few seconds that you need to take to drag your mouse and click on the button. If you have a fast network, but very fast users, you can also do that very fast. So what's going to happen? What I would expect to happen is that if somebody clicks on a row, it should update the right-hand side. And then if he clicks on the button, you should see the details of whatever you just clicked on. So if you clicked on element number 3, you should see the details of number 3. Okay? So is that what's happening? So raise your hand if you think that's not what's happening. Come on, guys, if that's what's happening, I have no subject for the demo, so of course that's what's happening. Thanks. So no, that's not what's happening. If you go fast, what you get is you get the details of the previously loaded elements. Why? Because here in show details, on my widget, I save the ID that I just clicked on. Then this ID is used by the show details button to open me the details of the record I just clicked on. So it seems fine, except that after I have saved the ID, I start a new asynchronous thing, an RPC here. And this might take an arbitrary long amount of time, during which my user can go and click on the button and sees not the element he clicked on. Wait, by the way, what he will see is an incorrect state. He will see the details of the previous element, and when he clicks, he sees the details of the new element. That's the correct thing. So this is inconsistent. How do we fix that? Once again, there's we awaited all the promises that we needed to wait, but what was wrong is we mismanaged the states. We stored a part of the state and then did something asynchronous, and the state is not consistent. So to fix that, what I did is create a local variable ID and use that to do the RPC, and only when the RPC is done, I rendered the template like before, but after the RPC is done, I saved the new ID in the variable this of the widget. I'm going to assume that render is synchronous, so that means that there's nothing that can happen in between the time I set the ID and the render completely happens. There's more issues. Very simple widget, but plenty of issues with it. So if a user clicks fast on different rows, click, 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 that happens. Sometimes people double click. There's 2 issues. First, he has to wait a long time to see the last thing he clicked on, likely the thing he wanted to see. Second, there's no guarantee on the order. It's not because you start something later that it will end later. Maybe the first few requests were lost in the network and will arrive a few seconds after the last one has arrived. So the user clicked in order the first, the second, the third, the fourth row, and what he will get is might be the first, the second, the fourth, and the third row result. So not what you would expect. And to fix that, well, you have to make a decision. You have to decide, and that's a business decision, not a technical one, what you want to happen. Do you want your user to see as fast as possible the last thing he clicked on, the last record? Or maybe it makes sense in your business that if he clicked multiple ones, that's because he wants to see multiple ones. So put multiple ones, every one that's every item he clicked in order on the screen. So I'm going to show you in Odoo how we solve this, those problems by introducing some what we call primitives, some new concurrency primitives. The first one is if you choose to load as fast as possible the last item the user clicked. That's a common use case. For this, we will use a primitive called drop previous. Okay? And what this does is when you submit with drop previous anything asynchronous, let's say the user clicked on number 3, so you have to wait for the RPC for number 3 to be complete. That's something asynchronous. It happens normally, but if a user clicks on a second item, so a second asynchronous is registered inside drop previous, it will immediately discard the previous one, right? It will mark them as failed and start the one that you just clicked on. And if you click on another one at any point in time, it will discard the previous one, mark it as failed, and start the new one. And once again, if you do it multiple times until finally the user decides to wait a little bit and see the results in his screen, and this process goes to completion. Remember earlier, I told you that we introduced a guarded catch concept. It works like a catch, but it doesn't catch actual errors, right? So this is why we had to introduce this, because everywhere in Odoo, we are rejecting promises, but not because there are errors. We are rejecting them because we don't want them anymore. So if you use in your Odoo code then unguarded catch, you guarantee that whatever is in the guarded catch will, I'm not sure anymore if it will or not happen if there's an error or not. So the catch will execute always if you throw an error, and the guarded catch will only execute if there's no real error. So if your network goes down, you will get an actual exception, a new error will be thrown, and it will go in the catch. And if you use the guarded catch, it will only execute if there's no error. So you reject the promise with an object, with a string, with an int, or with nothing, it executes the guarded catch. So that allows us to have fine control over what happens if something asynchronous will not happen, but there's no real error. And this is how you implement drop previous. It's implemented in the module concurrency, web.concurrency, so you have to require it. And usually we create the instance of our drop previous in the init of whatever you want to control the concurrency in. In this case, it's my widget. So I put on the instance of my widget detail drop previous, detail DP, and that's a new instance. Then whenever I want to request something asynchronous, I'm not doing it straight away. I'm adding inside my drop previous system the asynchronous request. So it will manage the execution of it, but also the discarding of whatever previously was registered in there. In this case, I don't need any catch because I don't care about the errors. If my, or either catch or guarded catch, by the way, if a previous request was done, it will be rejected, so then will not happen, or whatever is after the await will not happen. So I'm satisfied with that. And actually, that's it. That's how you manage the concurrency with drop previous. This will guarantee order because every time you register something, it will drop the previous one, and also that's a shortest amount of time that you can wait for your answer to be there. Now let's see another use case. You made the business choice to say, I need my user to see everything he clicked on in order. I want this process to go to completion every time. Even if he clicks really fast, that's my business, and that's fine. So for that, we have another concurrency primitive called mutex. The mutex works like a queue. Whatever you put in, you have to wait for completion before the next thing starts. So if a user clicks on item number 3, then the RPC starts. During that time, he clicks on item number 43, then the RPC does not start. He has to wait. This is blocked until the first RPC is done. Maybe he will click a second time on 43 because he wants to see the number 43, but still the RPC does not start. Eventually, in a future time, we don't know when, the RPC for the first number 3 is completed, So it's shown, and because the RPC is completed, it will unlock the next RPC, or the next promise in general. The first 43 can start, and of course it takes some time. When it will be done, it will unlock the next one, and finally the next one. If the user clicks on something in the meantime, he still has to wait for whatever was registered in mutex to be completed. So this is a very useful primitive tool when you want always the user to see whatever he clicked on. So you want things to always happen to completion in order as well. Of course, you can see that the total time is much longer, but if that's your business, it's fine. Yeah, finally, number 3 is shown. How do you implement it? Once again, the mutex is implemented in the concurrency module, so you have to require it. Once again, you need to obtain an instance of a new mutex. We do that in the init. And then there's a very specific JavaScript thing here. Mutex needs the function to be executed. Sorry. It needs to be executed in the scope of the widget itself. So here, I'm creating a variable called load data, and this variable contains a new function that is bound to this instance of this widget, and that, when called, will execute this.rpc with the parameters here. So that's not Odoo specific, it's JavaScript specific, but you need to do that. Then finally, you want to put this function in the mutex using the exec method, and this returns you a promise that will be resolved only after this specific instance is resolved. So maybe it's the first one and you just need to wait for this RPC. Maybe you have 70 in the queue and so that's the 71st, and you need to wait for those 70, and this promise will be resolved when this one is resolved. That's not the only primitives that we have implemented. There's a few more. One of them is called drop misordered, and it's used when you want to execute everything you put inside of it, provided that they're added in order. Everything that is added or comes back out of order is rejected. It's not very much used because drop previews, I think, are better primitives. As I said, to execute something one after the other, you have to use the mutex, and it will go to completion all the time. Go to the end as fast as possible. This is drop previews. It's used in many places in Odoo. Then finally, and that's the most complex word of the day, the last primitive is called mutex drop previews. You have to say it 10 times in your head before you can actually pronounce that correctly. Mutex drop previews, and that's a combination of mutex and drop previews. This is probably the most useful one, because what it does is you will put asynchronous processes in your mutex drop previews. It will execute the first one that you have put. If you add a second one, it will wait for the first one to complete. Then if you add a next one, if the second one is not started, it will literally drop it. So you want a complete correct state for the first RPC, then a complete correct state with the last RPC, and everything in between that did not start is dropped. So for instance, I don't know if you know the application Studio. There's a report editor there. On the left panel, you can change the font size and all properties, put text bold and so on. But the funniest one, I think, is the font size, because there's a button you can click and it will increase the font size by 1 every time. So for this, we use mutex drop previews, because what we want is some kind of feedback quickly for the user to know he's going in a good direction. He clicked on up button if he wants to increase the font size. But also we don't need all the intermediate updates, because we have the full update anyway, no matter what you ask the server. So we execute the first one completely, we drop everything in between, and the last one is the correct state. Also, this guarantees order like drop previews and mutex. So I think mutex drop previews is very useful, even if it's a long word. The final one is delay, which is a simple set timeout that works with promises. You call delay with a number of milliseconds, and it gives you a promise that will be resolved after that many milliseconds at least. And that it for primitives. It's used everywhere in the web add-on. That's exactly how we control that the user cannot cancel and save at the same time, or that the user cannot open two views at the same time, or get a controller and a renderer from two different views because they click really fast and the view switcher at the same time. It's exactly how we do it. So, well, you knew promises. I showed you how we build on top of promises to use declarative way to control the flow of actions. I've shown you that asynchronous bugs are quite insidious. It's not always something that you've coded and that you need to wait. And there's a few caveats to remember, I think. The first, and there's no quick way to do that, is to know what returns a promise. If you don't know that, you have already failed. So if you use a function, you have to see if it's declared with async. If it's declared with async, it always returns a promise. You have to know if at the end of the function there's a return anything asynchronous, or returns a call to another function that itself is asynchronous. This is a complex thing to do, but there's no other way than just do it and go to the end until you know what the return is of that function. Or put yourself in debug mode and just inspect and see what the return is. Second, there's a very high chance that you always need to wait for all your promises. Not doing that is a really difficult business decision. It's never a technical decision. If you don't wait for all your promises, what you will get is what we call flickering, where your screen is partially loaded, and then another part of the screen is loaded, and then squeezes the first part, and your things resize while the user is seeing that, which is never a nice experience. So if you don't wait for all your promises, likely you are making mistakes. There's very few promises in Odoo that we do not wait. Last, yeah, async is hard. As you have seen, I've shown you not obvious issues. And well, one thing that you can do to help yourself is use all the primitives that are declared in Odoo already. Know that if you start an asynchronous process, the user has the control until it's done. So likely you need to do something about that. And with that, I'm done. Thank you very much. Thank you. So remember, mutex drop previous, mutex drop previous, mutex drop. It's really hard. If you have questions, I'm available. Easy ones if possible. So the question is, can we apply the processes from the backend to the front end? I'm not sure I understand. Python is by definition not asynchronous, especially in Odoo. It's multi-threaded though. So I'm not sure this applies. Yes? Yeah, so the question is, if I define my template in the backend and it contains some JavaScript, should I already use the primitives and so on and promises? Is that correct? So the answer is absolutely, totally, 100% yes. Why? Because any JavaScript that you put on your pages everywhere will anyway execute in the browser under the control of your user. So yes, absolutely. No questions? Come on, hit me. Yes. So the question is, when will this be in the documentation? And that's a very good question. Thank you for asking. I don't know. I'm going to make a pull request Monday when I'm at work and maybe add a few lines of documentation if it's not there. But that's a good question, thanks. Okay, then if no more questions, thank you very much for attending and see you around.
can hear me? Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Thibaut François. So I'm working as technical consultant at Odoo, and I'm mostly a backend developer. So I'm here to talk about the developer tool of your browser and explaining you why, even if you're a backend developer, this is probably one of your best friends. To convince you, first I will have a short introduction. I will explain very lightly the Odoo architecture to see why this is important. This tool is really interesting. Of course, I will present the tool, but I guess most of you already know it. And finally, some practical case to show you how easy it can be to solve problem with this tool. And of course, a conclusion. So why should you care about the browser developer tool as a backend developer? Since you know you have your own tool to get information, you can put a PDB in the code, you can read the log, you can print everything you want in Python, you can even go in the database in SQL. The traceback has no secret for you, and of course, you can read the Python code. So basically, you know exactly what Odoo is doing when the transactions start. But usually, we forget about the initial condition, actually the parameter you get from the request. And since Odoo is a complex framework, sometimes you also missed what is the real output for the web client. If you remember the infamous API 1, it was returning a list of your result, not your result. Okay, and the developer tool, of course, gives all those information. So, about the Odoo architecture. We have two kinds of users with Odoo. We have the internal user that use the web client, and the web client is a single page application, and all of the code making the server is asynchronous code. So you won't see anything in your address bar. The external user on the website, they're making asynchronous call, synchronous call, it depends. Everything is handled by a dispatcher that will dispatch the right controller. Of course, the controller, they will use a model. The model use the ORM to talk to Postgres. You know already about that. So if you are a backend developer, you work with the web client most of the time, and you have 100% of asynchronous call. You don't see anything in the address bar. If you zoom in on the controller, of course, on the website, you have all the controller for application, home, shop, blog, etc. But for the web client, it's always the same, and they are available, most of them are available in this file. And the good thing about them is that if you interact with the model, it's always a dataset controller class that take care of that. And they get always the same parameter, the model name, the method, and of course the argument of the method as parameter. So you will see in the request basically which method is going to be called in your Python code and with which parameter. Okay, so let's present the tool. How to reach it first? Well, it's pretty simple. You can press F12 like this. And of course, there is a menu, more tool, blah, blah. But the good thing about this tool, the really good thing, it's available everywhere. I mean, it's available on laptop, but also on your business analyst laptop, on your customer laptop. So if someone showing you an error, you say, okay, just open your browser debugger tool and let's see what's happening. And since it's client side, you don't need to touch your server. So it's safe on your production server. You don't need to access it. You don't need to read the log. You don't need to, of course, stop it to put some print or debug point. It's really great. Okay, so we have many tabs. The first one is the element. You see the DOM, the CSS. It could be interesting for us when we put some HTML in our view, but it's mostly for web developer. Okay. So the console, you can try JavaScript code, but as backend developer, you don't like JavaScript, you don't know maybe JavaScript, so you don't play a lot with it. But it's great when you put some breakpoint, but once again, for web developer. The source, you get the JavaScript source. Sometimes you cannot read it, but if you want to add breakpoint, it's the place to go. And don't forget one thing with Odoo, you have to add debug equal assets, otherwise you just see the mimified version of the JavaScript and you are not able to see anything. And the last tab, well, there is more, but the last tab I'm talking about, is the network. And it's exactly what we need. It's all about the request sent to the server and the response of this server. So let's check it in detail. First, remember, everything is asynchronous. So 99% of the requests that interest you, they are asynchronous, and you can filter with XHR here. You won't miss a lot of information. Of course, you want to preserve the log in case of you're reloading the page or you have a redirect or something else happened and the log disappear. With that, it never happened, and you can always clean your log with this button. If we zoom on one request, of course, we have the header of the request, we have the URL of the request, and since it's RPC call, the most interesting is the payload of the request. In the payload, you will see in the parameter the model, the method. You have the args, which are the argument of the method, and the cowards. And if you're a Python developer, this should ring a bell. And in the cowards, you have always the context. It's easy to recognize it. Sometimes it's also in the args, but you always recognize it with the lang and the time zone. Okay, of course, we have the response of the server. The preview is nice because it's sparse and you can fold and fold part of the answer. Once again, it's really interesting to see, okay, what the server has responded to the web client. There is the timing. If you are talking about performance issue, if you have a spin and in the loading page, you don't know what is happening, since there is a lot of call at the same time. Sometimes you don't know exactly which transaction is causing the problem. And here you can see all the timing of all transactions. And the most important about backend performance issue is the time to first byte. It means how many time the web browser has to wait to get the first byte of information. If you have content download that take a lot of time, the problem is not the server, it's your network. Okay, and you have some useful action you can do with your query, your transaction, sorry. You can, of course, copy some information to make further analysis. You can replay it. You can copy a score, so you can replay it in your shell. So that would be interesting if you're, especially if you want to test performance issue and trying to see how much time it's taking. Okay, so let's see the practical case. The first case, I need to develop something. I want to automate the invoice creation from a sale order. Basically, what I need to automate, it's I go to the server, I click on create invoice, there is a wizard that pops up, I fill it, and then I click on the button create invoice on the wizard. So as backend developer, the first reflex, we read the view, we see, okay, the button is calling this method on the server, and you read the code, etc. It can take some time. If you are used to, it can take 5 to 10 minutes. If you're not used to, it can take a few hours. And you need to know, okay, since it's a button, I know I read the view, etc. So you need a lot of knowledge to know where to look. But there is another way. You can actually look what the network is telling us. And this is what the network is telling us. Well, there is one missing, the load of the action, but then when the wizard pop up, you have first a default get. Then you have an unchange, trigger by the default get. Then I fill the form, I have another unchange. Finally, when I click on the button, 3 operations happens. The creation of the wizard, the web client read again the information, and then it's finally calling the button. So you see there is a lot of requests happening, but we know in which order we have to call them. Let's see each of them in detail. The default get, well, always the model, the method. The argument is the list of fields for which you want the default value. And of course, you have the context. You always have the context. I just show you the interesting part. Since you are dealing with the wizard, the active ID is really important. So we will have to take care about those. And as a result, of course, you get the list of the field and the default value of them. We'll be able to use this value for the create. Okay, the unchange. Unchange is a bit complicated because as backend developer, we never use this method directly since it's a wrapper to call the the function, the compute field, and the onChange in the right order. So basically, what the web client is sending, first the list of ID. In this case, it's empty because the record does not exist yet. Then it's sending the state of the object, but from the web client perspective. So if you have changed something in the form, it will be sent to the server. Finally, you have the list of fields and the list of fields that has been touched. In this case, this field has been touched. And in this specific case, the result is really interesting. It's empty. This means actually you can completely skip the call to onChange. And for both of them, it was empty. So it's really nice. Something we don't have to do. Okay, the create, of course, you know about it. Just the method. Of course, you have always the model and the context. But here, what is interesting is the value pass to the server for the creation. Mostly is the default value plus what I have changed. And as a result, we get an ID. This ID is really important because we will need it for the call button. And the call button, you see the argument is the name of the method. And here you see which method has been really called. The ID of the record, and finally the context. And once again, since it's a wizard, it's really important to take care of the context. Okay, what have we learned from this case? Well, implementation become really straightforward. You know which method to call in which order. It only took 2 minutes. Just reproduce the scenario in your browser and you get all the information. And you don't need to read the code to start your implementation. But if you want to read the code, you know exactly where to look. So this is really great. And it's easy to understand the workflow of the web client. You don't know how to read the JavaScript, but at least you can see, okay, the web client is doing this, 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 and this. Okay, another case, interesting. The dim search is the method that is called when you are looking in the many-to-one for some record to set the value of this many-to-one. And here we are on the server line, we set the product, and then we want to set the unit of measure of that product, of that line. And we got only 2 results without typing anything. And I know there is 19 recorded in my database. This is weird. Of course, you think about there is a domain, but there is no domain in the view. There is no domain defined in the field. So there is something happening, but I don't know where does it come from. So once again, let's look at the network. Of course, we have an onChange when we change the product, and then we have the name search when we are looking for our unit of measure. And if we look the name search, this is the parameter that has been sent to the server. There is a domain. We don't know where it comes from, but at least it explains why I got 2 results. And we always forget about that, but the onChange can return the domain. So if we look at the onChange on the product, it returns a domain. And of course, in this case, it makes perfectly sense because you don't want to use units of measure that are not in the same category as the default unit of measure of your product. But if you want to change that, you know at least where to look. It's in the onChange, not in your name search. Okay, the third case, this is an old one, which is not necessary anymore, but I like it. You want to add a domain with a many-to-many. Basically, you have a field user ID, and you want to have the user only able to select few of them. So you have a compute many-to-many with user, and say you can only have a user from that list. So naturally, you will say ID in the list of user. This is in the view. Okay. So once again, you are going to type, you have a name search, and you get a traceback. It has been fixed since, but in V10 you get a traceback. So once again, let's look at the network. And you see something really interesting. You don't get the list of ID in your domain, you get 6 false and the list of ID. Ring a bell? Yeah, it's the many-to-many command. So it's saying, please replace the current list of ID with this list of ID. So we got information, but not properly formatted. And this is the solution become straightforward once again. Just get the first element of the list and then the third one. And this is working in V10. Don't do that in V30. And the last case, it happened also. You open the CRM app and you lead to a spin. It's spinning and it's loading, you don't know why. This is a database with a lot of opportunity, so probably it's because you have a lot of opportunity to read. It's a Kanban view, making a lot of search read for each column. But let's check the network. And actually, this is what's happening. This is not the search read or the read group. It's a read progress bar. This is something that computes the value needed for the progress bar in top of each column. So if you are looking at reading CRM lead, it's not actually the right program to spot. You know exactly with this where to spot and where to start your investigation. So in conclusion, no, I'm sure you are convinced that this is a really great tool, even if you're a backend developer, because it gives information to start your investigation very quickly. For debugging, for understanding the behavior of your wizard, of the web client, for spotting performance issue. And the really, really great thing about it, you don't need to touch your server. You can access it from everywhere. So if someone can reproduce the issue, you can check on his laptop directly, okay, let's see what is going on. And you can do it on the production database. Of course, if you create invoice to test, you will mess up your data, but you can always clean them later. But it's not a silver bullet, as always. It gives only few information to start your investigation, but it's always worth the shot. It takes only 1 minute to get the information, and after that you can start your investigation with the right information. Well, so if you have any question, I'm available. Exactly. Yeah. I think not in the documentation. So probably there is somewhere, but it's changing all the time. If you look at Olivier Denis' performance talk from a few years ago, you have also scheme with architecture, but it always depends on the point of view you get. Here it was from the code point of view, but sometimes you have from the component point of view, so it's always complicated to say. There is no one architecture scheme, but you know, there is not really good scheme. No. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Welcome everyone. Welcome to this talk about using Odoo Mixin to add feature to your application. A few words about me. I am Thibaut Delvalle. I'm working at Odoo since 8 years as a team leader. Currently in marketing applications, so mailing, mass mailing, SMS, e-learning, social. Since all those years, I have learned to try to reuse code bits because a lot of developers tend to redevelop from scratch their application. And what I propose today is to show you a few of Mixin that Odoo offers to add features to your application with as few code as possible. This presentation is based on work done notably with Yannick Tivis, Martin Trigo, and Damien Bouvy. So let us record everything from scratch or not, and let us learn the Odoo Mixin. Here is the outline of the presentation. First, I will just give you a quick reminders with classical dev about Mixin. Then I will present Mixin in three main categories. The first one being communication and organization, activities and discuss. The customer satisfaction and UTM, so the rating and the marketing. Website, portal and pages, and to control your document publication. Then if I have some time, which isn't here, I will show you some advanced mail thread features, just to show you how you can go deeper in the mail thread, just to give you the code bits to do it. And finally, a small conclusion. Through this presentation, I will use a demo application. I think for some of you already saw it on Wednesday with Yannick and with Nicolas Baillet also. It's a plant nursery application, and its purpose is to showcase Odoo and to see in the real application with the effect of each Mixin. So, quick overview of this application. It's a plant nursery. You have all plants with some characteristics, the stocks, some tags, a very nice Kanban view. You have customers and finally orders. So people can buy plants and it creates a nursery order. So it's a fully contained application, quite simple, but with several features to show you the Mixin. Here is classical dev. He doesn't always code application, but when he does, he inherits from Odoo Mixin. Classical dev is a really cool developer. But you may wonder, what is a Mixin? Vasistas. A Mixin is a class that extracts transversal features. It's an abstract model, so it means it has no table, no fields, and actually you define a feature with abstract fields and some methods. Then with inheritance, you will give those fields and features to your class. For example, the messaging, so discuss, or the rating are available in several applications with this mechanism. For example, here you have the definition of a small Mixin, mail thread. You see that I define two fields, message IDs and message follower IDs, and some methods. Basically, this Mixin has no use until you decide to use it, for example, in the plant model and the order model. With the inherit keyword, you inherit from the mail thread, and you copy the fields to your child classes. Same for the methods. The methods that you define on the Mixin are available on the child. You can call it, for example, you define a say hello method that calls message post. Or you can override the Mixin method and add some custom behavior that depends on the business scope of your application. You may also inherit from the abstract class itself. For example, Odoo offers a base mail thread Mixin. Then you want to add some feature to all mail thread childs. And you inherit from the mail thread, you add some custom stuff, and it will be automatically applied to all childs. It is a change in Odoo 11, and since 2 versions now, the inheritance mechanism works really well. Okay, you master the Mixins. Now what? The methodology of this presentation will be the following. I will show you the main features of the Mixin, the main one because there are a lot of features, and how to implement them in your application. I will show you code bits, so the purpose is not to show the whole code because it has no interest, but the main part of the code to understand. And I will show the live results on the plant nursery application. If you want some documentation, of course, with a lot of stuff with Odoo, you have to go into the Odoo code. It's the best way to understand how it works. We have also some documentation about the Mixin and all the code of the application itself with all the commits separated to understand each feature. And the slide of this presentation and those from Yannick will be available on this GitHub account. The feature that I will cover today are divided in 3 main categories: communication and organization. We will see how to add discuss and to send mailing SMS, and to schedule activities and to handle documents. About marketing, having customer satisfaction insights and to have a global satisfaction counter, and also how to track UTM bits, so the campaign, the mediums, which is important when you have a marketing team. And finally, more website-related features, how to control the publication of your documents, how to promote pages, and how to handle customer portal. On the north side, you will see very nice Pokemons. Those are used to somehow characterize the complexity of the implementation and the power that this implementation will give to you. It's very scientific, you know. Okay, let's start with the communication and organization with Discuss. MailThread, it's one of the biggest Mixin available in Odoo. Basically it adds the messaging, so Discuss, to any class. There is also it interfaces with the emails, so you can discuss with people, you can mention them, send an email or notifications. How to use it? It's quite easy to have the base feature of Discuss. You inherit from MailThread Mixin. Don't forget to depend on the main module, which defines this Mixin. And in the form view, you will use 2 main widgets: mail thread on message IDs field and mail followers on message follower IDs fields. So those 2 widgets gives you the widget on the form view that you all know to discuss, to invite followers, and to discuss with people. Just going into some details, how does it work behind the scene? Each discussion, each message is a mail message. It's a generic object that holds the content of the message, and we link it to a given model with its model and the ID of the document. That way we have one model that is used in every document and every model in Odoo, just with this pair of fields. When you discuss with people, those will be notified, and we store it directly on the mail message with partner IDs. And when in my custom plant application I inherit from MailThread, I have this message IDs field that is one-to-many, so the field that holds all the messages that belong to my document, and I have nothing to do, just inherit from the Mixin itself. It allows to communicate using Discuss. So like I told you, you have access to a message post method. When working with the MailThread Mixin, it's important to know that mail/post is the main entry point to post message on the document, because it creates all the necessary data, the catch-all, the reply, the recipients. So basically it creates the message and then it notifies people. Basically notifies people by the inbox, so for people that work inside Odoo, or by email. An example of improvement that we made this year is that with the SMS application, you also have the SMS notification mechanism that is added, and it's done using inheritance. You also have the followers management. like you have messages that are generic, followers are also generic. You link it to your model with a model res ID, and you have access to message follower IDs field with an API to subscribe and unsubscribe people. And next point is the mail gateway. So MailThread automatically integrates your mail gateway. You have to configure your incoming and outgoing mail servers. And it means that it will detect the threads when you send an email to a customer and that this customer replies. MailThread has a root heuristics that tries to find the original thread and post the message in the thread. Or if it detects that this message should begin a new document, it creates the documents and then posts the message. For you, if you want to customize this behavior, the two main methods to know are message new and message update. They are called when either the mail gateway creates a new document or updates a document, and you can inherit from those methods and add your custom behavior. Typical modification that you can do, that we do, for example, in project or in helpdesk, is to search for the people in CC of the incoming email, to create customers and to link them in the followers of the document, so that we keep a trace of every people that was notified, and that can be done with inheritance quite easily. Okay, so after all those words, what does it mean for the application? I will apply the commit. I update my module. It will install the mail application, also some dependencies. We will wait until it updates the database. You see that there are a lot of dependence modules. Okay, plant is reloaded. Yeah. Okay, reload. I applied MailThread to my application, and you see that I have some new bits. For example, I have 100 messages on a plant. I have access to the sys with a summary of some messages that people asked me. And if I go on the plant, I have access to the chatter. I can send a message, log a note, attachment. I have the management of followers, so I can follow. The same for orders. I have an order with my customer, and I can send a message to my customer. Hello, customer. I mention him. And normally, if my email go out, I just receive the email as my customer. So with a few lines of code, I already integrated all the discussion mechanism within my application, and it was very easy to do. Like I said, with the V13, we made some improvement in the SMS management. It's now automatically integrated within Chatter and Discuss. You just have to inherit from MailThread, so nothing to do from that point of view, and depends on the SMS module, and use a widget phone on the field that holds the phone number, and you give the option to enable SMS. Now it's integrated inside Chatter. It was not the case in previous versions. Behind the scene, we define a message post SMS tool method that you can use in your application that compute the recipients, format the number, and send the SMS. And on your module, you have to define the field to use to find this number when you are doing SMS marketing. For example, here, on my customer, I have access to a composer on this mobile, so I have the recipient, the message, and if I send the SMS, time to contact the IAP servers. Okay, you see that it's sent, and you have the status, it has been sent, and I receive it, and it's here. And also you have, it's integrated inside the sys tray. It means that, for example, I have a failed SMS here, And if I click on it, I can see why, and I can manage it directly from the interface. For example, here I don't have enough IAPL credits, I can buy them. So that means that you enable the SMS automation in your application with really few lines of code. And same, you can do, select on the list, you have a small action, you send SMS text message, and you are doing SMS in batch very easily. Okay, that was for mail thread and discussion. The next step is to organize your daily flow with activities and documents. Activities are managed using the mail activity mixin, so you can create activities, assign them to people, and it helps them organize their daily work. It's also integrated inside Disqus with the mail activity widget that is defined on the activity IDs fields. Like messages and followers, activities are generic, and with the model and res ID fields, it's linked to a given document. Everything is defined inside the mail application, so just depend on mail, add the mail activity mixin, and you can have much fun. The mixin gives you several helpers and tools. Notably, it computes a state based on activities. It means that if you have activities to do in the past, you have overdue activities, you have filters, you have a specific view, an activity view defined for activities, so you can manage them directly from Odoo. You also can go deeper in activities and try to automate them. Automation is given by the activity mixin, and you have some helper method, activity schedule, feedback, and unlink. And it allows you to define a custom flow in your application. For example, in the plant nursery application, we want to say that if we create an order with a plant, we automatically want to create an activity for the responsible to pack the order and to prepare the plant itself. For that, we just call, look, you see the code, activity schedule. We say them to create an activity to do, to user demo, and we give a deadline. And when the order is confirmed, we consider that the activity is automatically closed. So with a bit of code, but just using the mixin method, you can create a workflow to automatize and help people in their job. So I will just show you, going to the next commit. An activity, I update. It's done. I reload. I applied the activity mixin. So if you go here on the plant, you see that I have my new widget with the activities, some overdue, some planned. I can schedule an activity. I have the sys-tray that is telling me that I have activities to do in the plant or in the order. You can go here in the activity view. You can go on the orders that have activities. And about automation, we just show you the result of the code. I create an order, like a customer, category. It's for Beverly demo. I add a plant. I save it. And you see that an activity has been planned for Beverly demo that she can handle. And if we log with the demo user, going in Disqus, you see that she has received the notification about the activity to do, and she can organize her job and use it. Okay, so when she has done it, she marks it as done. It's done, not done. And on the other side, order 2, you see that the activity has been done. So with the code that I show you, which is not really complicated, you have integrated the activities management directly in your application. After activities, you want to be able to organize your documents. Since the last version of Odoo, we have a document application. It allows you to manage documents, to discuss directly on documents, to manage tags, folders. And you have, with Odoo, the possibility to integrate yourself with documents. For that, you inherit from the documents mixin, and you also have to depend from the documents application. And you have a bit of code to do. Basically, you have to say to the mixin the folder and the owner of the documents that you will create. So you just override those three methods according to your business application. And then you can use all the power from the documents with a few code. For example, next commit. I reload. It installs the document application. Back. Reload. So that I have the new views. Okay. So you see I have now access to the document application. I have a workspace for my plans. Currently I have no documents. And on the plant, for example here, Beverly asked me to send some technical information. I can add attachment, for example, a presentation, and can also add a very interesting GIF. And if you go on the document application, you see that automatically these documents are available in the documents. You can now use this application. You see that you can discuss directly on the document to ask for details. You can manage it, so add tags or work on it. So once again, with not too much code and not too difficult to understand, you have added a bridge with the documents, and it allows you to manage your documents. Okay, what have we covered until now? We have seen with mail thread, activity, and documents that you are able to integrate with Disqus to send mailings, SMS, and to organize your work with activities and documents. The next step is that now you have some internal stuff that is working. You want to have some marketing insight. The first one is the customer satisfaction. It's quite important in any business to know a bit how the customer feels and to ask for his satisfaction. For that, we have a rating inside Odoo that is defined in the rating module. And you just inherit from the rating mixin, and it will add a new fields on your application. So the ratings are a note that the customer gives to your application or to your document. The same as other ratings are generic. With model and res ID, you find back the ratings of a document. And you have helper fields and helper methods, the last value, the last feedback, the overall satisfaction, the number of ratings. And it allows you to analyze how it works. It's a bit of work to use it. For example, in our example of plant nursery, we want to ask for customer satisfaction on nursery orders. So when people order something, we want to be able to send a request to ask if they are happy or not. The first thing to define is who is rated. In rating, a customer rates somebody on the document. So the people who is rated is given through the rating get rated partner ID method. It's a bit long, but you have to know it exists. And in our application, we just say that the responsible of the order will be the person that is rated. Next, you define the people that rate. Generally, it's the partner or the customer. So in your case, we take the partner ID that is defined on the customer. And you also have some more complex stuff inside rating. You don't have to override it necessarily, but it's better to understand that it exists and how it works. Customer gain access to your document using an access token, so they bypass the access rights and have access they're able to write and post a message and add a rating on your document. And it's secure because there is an access token that is unique and quite secure. It's provided by the Mixins, so basically you have nothing to do, but you have to understand that how it works. And with this access token, the customers will go on some controller, some route, so we can give it score, so if you're happy or not, give a feedback. And all of that is done basically, generally with emails. It's the simplest way to interact with your customers. You define an email template containing the ratings you send to the customer, and you can click, for example, on the smiley face and give a feedback. It's the point that is a bit more difficult to implement because it's an email template. It's a lot of stuff, and I know from long that a lot of people have troubles defining them. You have example of rating email templates inside Odoo and inside this application. So if you're interested, just go on the GitHub account and see how it works. Basically, a mail template is just defining the various fields of an email, the from, subject, the to. And in our case, what is important are the calls to the rating. You just define some images, satisfied, not satisfied, or highly not satisfied, and you link it to the route that are defined inside the rating application. So when the customer click on it, it calls the route, and then you have the rating and the feedback. I will just show you how it works in live. Still not the good one. Okay. Next commit. The rating mixin is added. I'll reload, it will install the rating module. Okay, it's done. What's new? In my application, I go on my order for the Debugger. I have defined a small button, send a rating request. And basically it sends an email based on the email template I just showed you. So if I click, you see in the chatter that I have posted the message with the notification. And going back to my customer email, you receive the email satisfaction. Here the images are not displayed because I am on localhost and Gmail prevents it, but basically you have faces. Let's say that my customer is satisfied. I open the link in incognito. You see that he's not logged, but he has access to a small screen to give it feedback. He's satisfied. Give it feedback with a typo. Okay, the feedback is post. And for my okay, it was relevant. You see that I have a new messages. So the customer just posted his feedback. I have here is happy. I have made a state button based on the ratings of the order. So I have all the ratings that the people gave on this order. And so for each order, I can see the satisfaction. You will tell me that the next step is to have, okay, I have the rating on each order, but what can I do with it? The rating parent mixin allows actually to concatenate all the reviews in a container document. For example, you rate task, but you want to have the overall rating satisfaction on the project. For ticketings, you have the same for the helpdesk team, and in our application, each order belongs to a category, and we want to have the global satisfaction of a category. For that, you have the rating parent mixin, so it means it's for the parent document, also defined in the rating application. It also gives you a rating IDs fields, so it's a rating, but not the ratings on the container, but the ratings of all the childs. So in your case, the ratings of the category are all the ratings of the orders of the category. And you have with percentage satisfaction, so a field that computes the statistics. Okay, so if I go on my categories, so I have the various categories of orders, and on my nursery I have 100% satisfaction. You can see that here the orders, and if I go here I have all the ratings. It seems that 4.5 is considered as 5, so it's good. Now you have the satisfaction of your customer, you can discuss with him. The next step is to organize your marketing team, and for that we want to be able to track the UTM. So UTM are the three magic keywords that notably Google uses: the campaign, the source, and the medium. And you use them when doing marketing. For example, on Facebook, you are doing a Christmas campaign. So you create a campaign, the source will be Facebook, and the medium will be, for example, a post that on the social application, or just you send the link to some people with the mass mailing, and you want to define UTM fields on it. For that, you inherit from the UTM mixin that is defined in the UTM module. And actually, it's a simple one. It just adds those three fields to all documents that inherit from it. There is a bit of magic inside UTM. So in the dispatcher, actually, when you receive a link that looks like that, so you see that I have UTM campaign, medium, and source that are given as parameters, it will automatically convert them into UTM records in Odoo. Either the string exists and he takes the record, or he automatically creates the record. I will just show you. Okay. It will install the UTM. It will also install the website. Yannick and I, we worked on a small website page for a plant application module. So you will see that we have a small page allowing people to go on our small shop to browse the plants that we offer and to make a small order. Okay, going as incognito. So my customer goes on my very nice website page. He has access to the plants, and he could, for example, make an order. But I send him an email, and he has a specific link, you see, with the UTM campaign, the UTM medium, and the UTM source. So automatically those are stored inside Odoo. He wants to buy a plant, so he gives his name. He makes an order. Thanks for buying. You see that an order has been created. And if I go in the backend with the admin, just reload to add the views. I have a new order here, the order 3 from Alfred. And you see that automatically I have on the record itself the campaign, the source, and the medium that are set. So there are many to one fields, you can filter on them, perform a search on them, and so for each campaign you know which campaign works and which doesn't work, and it allows you to organize your marketing activity based on this. For example, here I can decide to group my orders by campaign, and when I have a lot of records I can see that some campaigns are better than others. Okay, for UTM. This ends the part about marketing. So what we saw today is that you can get the customer satisfaction using the rating mixin, and also that you can track the marketing items using the UTM mixin. The next step is to talk a bit about website, portal, and pages. We will begin with document publication. I showed you that we developed a small website for our plants. But in a real use case, generally you want to be able to prepare records, for example, a blog post or an e-learning course, but you don't want people to access it until you decide to publish it. For that, we have the website published Mixin. Its purpose is to control whether a document is available on the front end or only to internal people. It's available with the website module, and you just have to inherit from the website published Mixin. It defines basically 3 fields, as you can see. Is published, which is the flag that tells whether the record is published or not. The can publish, which says who can change this flag. The default behavior is that website publisher, so people working with website, can change this flag. And the website URL. Speaking about that, please remember that access rights and root management are still up to you. So what we offer with Odoo and this Mixin is a way to automatically have this flag, some widget, but you have to define the access rule. So if you want people if you want that people don't see unpublished, you have to write it as an ACL. And you also have to define the root and your website, as in all applications, obviously. In our case, we just say that the people that can publish are the publishers for a plant, and we give to Odoo the URL to the plant. So in your case, it will be, for example, plants and the slug of the plant. Small note, slug is the method available in website that computes the nice name of a record. So instead of just having the ID 2, it will take the name and the ID. So for example, plants / my beautiful plant 2. Yeah. Now that we have that, you want to control it in the backend and in the front end. In the backend, you have a widget, website redirect button, that you define on the field it's published. And I think most of you have seen it. You have the go to website. It allows you to jump to the page of the document and control the published status. In the front end, you have 2 things. The first one is that you have a native support of the isPublish flag in the website editor. It means that if you are a website publisher, you automatically have this toggle available. You don't have to do anything basically to publish or unpublish documents. And if you want to do it manually, you can use widgets that are defined in website. There is publish management and publish short. And those are displayed like that. So it's small buttons that you can add where you want in your template, just to control the publish of your prints. Yeah, some details. Okay, we show you just after. For more advanced use case, you may use multi-website. For example, you have a shop for America and a shop for Europe, and you decide to have 2 websites. The website multi-mixin just add the website ID field on your record, and it allows you actually to say that this record is available either on a given website, just in USA, or all websites. And finally, you have the famous website published multi-mixin. That is basically the combination of the 2 mixin. So you control the published status of a document and the website on which it will be published. Okay, just showing you. I'm not using multi-website because it's advanced, but you can already see the results of published status. What's it published? What? Okay, I reload. Going back to my plants management, going on the basil, and I have my small widget go to website. So based on the is published, click on it, and I am on my plant. So you see the nice small front-end page that I developed within it. The published management can do it directly, or what I did also is to be able to manage them directly from the page. So as I am an admin, I can decide to unpublish some of them and to publish some of them. And as an anonymous, transfers. You see that it sees only the published records and it cannot see the unpublished records. So it allows you to filter what the customer sees, which is really important in your front end. Okay, you have a nice front end, it's cool. You have a website, it's cool. But now you want people to have access to what they did on your website, which is the customer portal. It's defined with the portal module, and it's separate from the website. And our purpose in the plant nursery application is to give access to a customer to the order he just made. So he buy a plant, he receive a link, and with this link he can see the status of its order, and maybe he can discuss on it or send technical information. For that, we inherit from the portal Mixin, and what it does is it computes an access URL that is not, it's different from the website one, it's a private one, and it's based on an access token. It means that only the customer can see, will receive this link and can see the document. People cannot try to browse or to find orders linked to other customers. You have to have this access token. You have a warning, it helps you to somehow control who can share on that, and the URL, and you just give the front end, the portal URL, which for example here is my order and the ID of the order. The portal Mixin also have quite complex but interesting get share URL method. It computes a generic URL for your document based on the controller defined in mail. It receives the model, the ID of the document, the access token, and this generic controller allows to redirect people according to their access rights. It means that with one URL, the customer will arrive on the customer portal, but the responsible of the order will go into the backend. So it allows with one URL to decide who goes where. It's integrated with signup. It means that if you allow people to subscribe on your website, they will be able, with a notification token, to create a portal account and to link the document with their portal account. So in our case, we don't want to, for example here, we don't want to share internal records, and we just give the portal URL of the order. As with website, remember that writing access rights, writing the routes, and writing the customer portal itself is still up to you. And it's very important to think about your access rights to avoid to leak information. I will just show you. Okay. Same as website, Yannick built a bit a small customer portal, a bit like what exists with current in Odoo. So for helpdesk teams, tickets, tasks, you have a portal. We built the same kind of portal for clients. Just reload. Going back to my orders with Léo Degrance, I have this share button. I will send him the link. So you see there is a link here with the model, the res ID. I send him. Seems there is an issue with internet maybe. Doesn't want to send the email, I think. Okay, I will just copy the link. And if I go on an incognito window with the link, normally you receive the email, but I have some trouble sending it. So the customer has access to its order on the portal. So you see, it's not the website, it's the portal. He has some details on the order, and we define also the portal widget. It allows customer to discuss with the responsible. For example, hello responsible. We will add some very interesting details we send. And through the customer portal, my customer is able to give information to discuss directly with the responsible. So you see here that the message that the customer posted is already available. Next, you have a portal, you have a website. The last things we want to do with a website in Ableton Records is to optimize the ACO. The ACO are the keywords that you can define on a page to speed up, or not speed up, but optimize the ranking. Typically with the website SEO metadata, you define the title, the description, the keywords, and the image. And Google will use them to make its ranking. You just inherit from the website SEO metadata class, and that is defined in website, so it's an easy one. The small magic trick to know is that when rendering the page of a document, you have to tell what is the main object. So the small key, main object, which in our case is the plant, it will activate the SEO feature within the website. I will show you. So my pages are SEO optimized. Going on the plant, still this one, website. As I have defined the main object, I have access to this promote menu. I can optimize the SEO, can give the title, the description, which is short, I know. I can add some tags. I choose an image. I save, and I have defined the SEO of my plant. If you go into the source, you will find in the meta the keywords I gave, and then you see the image that I defined, the custom title that I gave, it's the website. So you see that you just change and optimize actually the SEO of your page with just this small mixin. Okay, this concludes the website part. So we saw how to manage document publication and the portal page. The graph. You have seen a lot of documents. Just a small summary of what we saw today. You see that we have seen various mixins. Some of them are more complex or give more power. For example, the UTM, the rating, and the website published are not very complicated to implement and give small features, interesting features, but that you can use in your daily job. Match thread and portal are a bit more complicated to implement, but potentially give you more power in your application. Oh, classical dev. He doesn't always go to technical talks, but when he does, he wants to master everything, because you know, classical dev is really a cool dev. I have a few minutes left, so I will give you some hints of advanced match thread features. I won't go into details because I will lose every one of you, and you will probably throw stuff at me. Just give you some bits of information, and if you're interested, just go into the code and try to play with it. First one are the subtypes. We have seen the discussion, the messages, but in some cases you want to be able to characterize a message. For example, in your plant application, if the price of a plant is changed, we don't want to say it's a classic message, we want to say that its subtype is another one, and we define a subtype, which is a main message subtype. The name is price updated, and it's linked to the plant. The simplest way to implement it is to say that manually, if the price is changed, I will post a message in the chatter, but instead of telling it's a comment, we say it's a plant price, a price updated. It means also that people are able to choose to follow or not the subtype. So what the purpose of that is to say, for example, salespeople don't want to receive in their inbox all the messages and discussion, but they just want to be notified when the price is updated. And that's the whole purpose of the subtype that is integrated inside the chatter here. Yeah, it's cool, but you want to automate it. You don't want to write custom code for each field, so you will use the tracking. Tracking value change is very important, and all people that develop applications know it. We want to have an history of some important values, because we consider that we cannot just change it without notifying people. For that, you can use the tracking attribute directly on the field. For people coming from previous version, it was track visibility parameter that has been renamed with Odoo 13. And you can give a sequence allowing you to organize the sequence when there is a tracking value. And delogging is automatic. It means that you don't have to write custom code anymore. Just say track those fields, and every time there is a change, it will be logged in the chatter. And obviously, you want to mix both of them. And for that, and if you are interested, go in the code, see how it's used in standard Odoo applications. Track subtype method, allowing you to say when there is a change with a given set of changes, trigger this subtype. So now with that, the name and the price of the plant is tracked. And what is interesting is that the messages that are done use the plant price subtypes, meaning that salespeople are automatically notified with the price change. And finally, you want to send an email because it's important to notify people by email, not just a message. And you can go further and use the track templates method. It's a bit complicated, but basically, you say for a given set of changes, send an email based on email template. So just a reminder, email template is what I showed you a few slides ago. There are a lot of examples in Odoo and in the application if you want to duplicate and play a bit with it. And so it means that when a single value is changed on your document, there is a mailing that is sent to one people. And for example, what you can do is to automatically send a rating request to your customer in the template that you send automatically. For example, you could say that when I close my order, automatically, if the state goes to done, I will send a customer request. What we did here is just that I will just show you the price update feature. Okay, it's already loaded, I think. So going back to the plant. Let's say that I want to add Beverly. Now she follows. I check that she follows the price updated, okay. And if I change the price, you see that I have the tracking message, so the price has been updated. You see that there is a mailing that has been sent. And if I log as Beverly, normally you should see that she just received here the email. She works with her inbox, it's cool, so she received here, but if she works by email, she would have received an email with the blend updated. So with this small example, you have seen how to integrate more advanced integration with Disqus, subtypes, tracking, and stuff like that. 5 minutes, okay. Finally, the mail alias mixin say that when people send an email to a category, it will automatically create an order with a plant of this category. For that, we use the mail alias mixin that define a mail alias that is basically the left part of an email, and you say when I receive an email on this alias, I will do something like creating an order. For that, you have to override the alias model name and alias values. For example, I say that here, when I receive an email on the plant category, it will create a new order. Just quickly, I will show you. Where are they? Not website, plant nursery. I have defined an alias, so it's td plus Christmas@odoo.com. I should have an email somewhere. Yeah, this one. So I receive an email from my customer. I will activate my email gateway. So incoming mail servers. I fetch the email. Okay. You see in the logs that so the mail has been route, and if I go in my orders, I have a new orders with the original email with the image integrated that has been created. So it means that with the alias, I automatically create documents, and I can choose which document I create and which data I want to update on it. And as you see, it's integrated with all we did before. So you have the activities, you have access to the document, you can discuss, you have the rating, you have the share, you have the reviews. So you see that with all the mixing that we saw today, we greatly improved our application. It was a simple plant management, and now we have a lot of tools to automate and to have to ease our daily job. You have a headache, me too. So, what did we saw today? A lot of things. So it's a summary of what we saw. So if you have to keep one thing in mind, is that with all the Odoo version, each year we add some features, we add mixing, and we try to extract them in abstract classes. And we really would like people to use them in their application to add the features without having to record everything and just reuse what exists in Odoo. Thank you for your attention. As a reminder, here's a link to the code. So as I said, each commit adds a mixin. You have all the commits from Yannick from Wednesday to create your first application, and then all the commits from today to improve this application. Thank you. And if you have some questions, don't hesitate. Okay, so the question about portal, no, you don't have, the question is, should the customer has a portal account? No. It's the purpose of the access token, actually. So it's anonymous and secure access to the portal. So you don't have to allow people to subscribe to your database because for some reason you don't want people to create accounts. But with the access token, they have access to a document. The downside is that if they make several orders, they will receive a different link for each order, and they don't have a way to manage them. For that, you have to activate portal accounts. But with access token, they have access without user portal account. Just one question. Otherwise, you can find me probably near the bar or near the food. So, thank you.
Just raise your hand if you want to ask a question. And
is there any specific reason that Odoo is not using RDBMS power more? I mean, more for the burden are on application side. There isn't any well function written at database side.
can you put the mic?
Sorry.
Yeah. So is there a reason why Odoo is not using what?
RDBMS power. I mean, the functions, the stored procedures. We are not using any more RDBMS.
You mean we don't use anything special in the database level?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even it's PostgreSQL is more far capable to doing more, but we are not. Odoo is putting more burden on application side rather to RDBMS side. Is there any specific reason for that?
Yeah, there is. It's a choice that we did. So for us, the database is just used to store and also to ensure the acid properties of the transactional problem. And but for us, we prefer to have all the business logic on the Python part. And I've worked in some project where they were using a stored procedure, and usually I think it's a mess from a developer point of view, because usually the stored procedure, for example, if you use PL, it's called PL SQL, the one from Oracle, the language is ugly, and you have those procedures that play together. It's not object oriented. So yeah, it's a choice that we did at the very beginning of Odoo. When we started Tiny ERP, we said, okay, we will just use the database as a storage layer, and we don't regret that choice. It also means that we are mostly, even if we don't do it really, but we are mostly database agnostic. It would be possible to port Odoo to another database.
Yeah. There's an extra reason. If the database is doing stuff, let's say, behind your back, it's extremely difficult for the ORM to remain consistent. And one of the problems we have is we have a cache for what we read in the database. And if actually the data is modified and the ORM doesn't know because it's in a stored procedure, the cache is inconsistent. You don't know when you have to invalidate it and some things like that, you see. It's very difficult for the ORM to remain really consistent, remain correct, if you have unexpected things happening in the database.
And actually, we already have the problem with on-delete cascade. We have the problem.
Hello. I was wondering if there's any solution for example, we have many use cases where we have created cron actions that create thousands of invoices, but sometimes there's an error in one invoice in the middle of the process, and we would like to pass on the exception and continue with the rest, but then we would have to do manual commits and manual rollbacks.
Yeah.
And is there a solution in the ORM for this?
Yes, there is a solution. The solution is currently on the cursor object, the database cursor object. There's a method called SavePoint. It's a context manager. So you say with cr.SavePoint calling, and then you execute some code, and essentially it places a save point in terms of database before, and if you get to the end, it means you've gone there. If you crash in the middle, it rolls back until the beginning of the save point. You see, it rolls back to that point, and you can then catch the exception, put that thing aside, and it's not committing in the middle. Actually, the save point is kind of a soft commit in the middle of a transaction, and you can roll back to that sort of save point. So using save point, you can handle these things. And this is how we've implemented, for instance, the import of CSV or Excel files. you can just test the import. The way it works is that for every line, it makes a save point. It tries to import it, and if it crashes, it writes somewhere the error that occurred, and then it goes on the next ones. So it can tell you it worked except for 5 records where you have those problems. So it's feasible, and use a save point for that. You see on the cursor there's a save point method. If you grep into our code, there are a few places where we use a save point for exactly that kind of scenario. Thank you.
We have another problem. In the invoice, when we try to validate the invoice with multiple users, if there are multiple users doing the same activity, validating the invoice, at the time we are getting the concurrent issue. Since version 8 to 12, we are facing the same issue. Okay, and why we are getting this issue? Because we are using a standard sequence. So every time the number gets generated from the database, so if we are getting the issue, concurrent error, then the number gets skipped automatically. So this issue we are facing since version 8 to 12. I don't know whether it's there in version 13 or not.
Well, tell me if I understand correctly the question. So it's about skipping number in sequence?
Yes.
Because you have two kinds of sequence. One of them is the Postgres.
No gap and standard, yes.
And you have the no gap one that use a lock to ensure that you don't skip number. And you can choose either one or the other.
Yeah, but my question is like that, how can we handle this concurrent issue situation? It's mostly with the invoicing, any of the object which is using the sequence.
Yeah.
So is there any standard solution for that? Whether we want to use the standard sequence, we don't want to use the no gap one.
Why?
There is no specific reason for that, but
because
even though whether we are using no gap or standard one, we are getting the concurrent issue.
You can choose to use either one or the other, but they have different properties. And one of the property of the no gap is that you get no gap. And so if you don't want to skip number, you need to use that.
This is a legal requirement for most collections.
For example, for sales order, we don't use the no gap sequence because we don't care. It's just internal reference number. But for the accounting, you cannot skip numbers.
Question is that whether any can we handle the concurrent situation? My question is that not for the sequence particular. Question is regarding the concurrent issue.
You're not supposed to get the concurrent issue if you are using the standard sequence, or maybe then the concurrent issue is elsewhere. But normally in accounting, you would be using the no gap sequence because you want to make sure you have no problem of missing numbers in the accounting, because you need that for auditability reason. And in that case, you can have a concurrent issue if 2 numbers are being requested at the same time, because the journal basically is the sequence of the journal, and the journal can only give 1 number at a time, because otherwise you don't know which one is the last one. And even worse than that, you need to wait for the commit of the whole transaction that requested the last number before you can grant another number, because if it's rolled back at any point, that number is not consumed and it's free for another transaction to use. So that's why no gap sequence is so important. And the framework automatically handles that. Normally at the RPC level, when there is a call for a transaction that is going to use a sequence, there is a wrapper that will catch transaction rollback errors because a sequence is being used already in another transaction. And the system will automatically retry it. And it's not just for no gap sequences, that's a common case, but it's also the case for any other transaction where you are writing on the same object at the same time in 2 different transactions, and the system cannot decide which transaction is going to win and who decides, because these transactions are supposed to be handled in a serializable way, so they should be each processed as if nobody else was working on the system. So what the Odoo is going to do at the RPC level, where before dispatching the request, is going to redo, after waiting a little bit, is going to replay the transaction because it failed, because another transaction is being processed. So it waits for the completion, or actually it just waits a random time, hoping that the transaction is going to be completed, and then it redos the transaction. So normally, there is already a mechanism for that. It's limited in the sense that it's going to retry only 5 times with random numbers. So if you have a high contention on the journal, so let's say you are trying to generate 10 numbers at the same time, then one is going to be processing, and the 9 others are going to randomly wait and retry and wait and retry, and probably then they're going to all conflict with each other. So if that's the case, then maybe the no-gap sequence is being too overused, and the most obvious solution in that case is to split in different journals to make sure you have smaller journals.
What you can do would be to queue the operation.
Or you need or you need to do whatever you want yourself to process the transaction one at a time, so maintain another queue and process things one after the other. Or maybe just mark the invoices to be validated and then have a background cron that will do them one after the other, so there's no conflict of transaction. But if you use standard sequence, you shouldn't have that issue because there's no concurrency on the journal sequence, but it could be a concurrency error on something else, and then the problem can also occur. I hope I answered.
Hi, I just seen in a call.
Can you put the mic?
Yeah, I just been in a talk with Fabian, and he showed the Odoo SH.
Yeah.
It says each worker can handle 25 users, but I seen in later talks it was less. It was like 6 users. Can you explain it?
I explain you the reason. It's a secret. I explain you the reason behind that number. The problem is that when salespeople have to quote for a project, if we don't give them a simple number, they always call us and say, yeah, blah, 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 blah. But it's not true. It's not 25. It depends on what those users are doing. But we needed to get a number, and so we did some kind of average, and we got that number. But that number is a lie. I mean, if you have 100 users and they do nothing on Odoo, you don't need that much worker. But if you have users and they are clicking all the time, click, 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 click on a button, they will do more. So it's just a number that fits, and it's a sales tool for salespeople to because when you start a project, even at the start of a project, you don't know what the user will be doing, but you need to quote something to say, okay, it will cost that much.
But
yeah.
There's also something that may be relevant is there are 2 numbers like 25 and 6, but they're not described in the same situation. Yeah. 6 is what number I used in my slides a few years ago to explain the multi-worker system in Odoo when there is a sub-process at the operating system level that processes and queries requests sequentially. And if you are using the multi-worker system of Odoo, then you should scale it with 6 users per worker in mind. The thing is, Odoo SH doesn't use that system. They're using a mixed mode between multi-threaded and multi-process. So they're actually kind of able to get more performance for a single process. So that's why you can get 25, whereas with a normal worker of Odoo, that would be only 6.
Yeah, and we introduce. I think everybody now can use this system because it's in standard now. Having multiple worker, multi-thread. Not? Okay. So they use multiple worker, and each worker can spawn many threads, and I think we limited something like 10 threads per worker, because after you have the GIL that the effect of the GIL is too strong. So we had to find a good balance. Yeah.
They can do it. You could do the same, but you have the problems of load balancing. Basically, if Odoo SH does it with a single process because they have another dispatcher process in front, and so it's a bit different. But if you want to do it yourself, you can just run multiple multi-threaded servers and synchronize them on the same database. But then you have all the problems of multi-deployment. So you need to synchronize the sessions, you need to synchronize the code, and you need to load balance between them. But otherwise, you could get the same kind of result.
Okay. So I have two quick questions, please. The first one is regarding the database. Are you planning to support other databases that, like
no.
for example?
Okay. I say the opposite of what I said earlier. So Odoo doesn't use many features of Postgres, many specific features like stored procedure and things like that. But we still use some of them. Like, for example, we use with recursive or maybe some syntax specific to Postgres, not that much, but the reason why we don't want to switch database, it's because we don't see the need. PostgreSQL is a great database. It works perfectly, and we don't have any problem with that. And it's, yeah. So why would we switch to another database? What's the point of switching to another database?
For example, if we had a project when we had
wait, usually the reason why people ask this is because they have a customer, and the customer said, we only work with Oracle, or that database and that database. And no, we won't switch for that. They should switch to Postgres.
Because it's very difficult to replicate PostgreSQL and to have big data.
Okay, the replication with huge database in Postgres. Yeah, maybe.
And also the performance, because it's millions of records, because it was a account analytic project.
Yeah.
And the performance was not really.
And you're sure that the problem was really Postgres performance? It was not something else? Because usually Postgres is efficient.
Yes, because we had done a small test. We have developed something using Flask just to test with MongoDB. It was much better.
Okay, but you lose the acid.
No, just to test if we have millions of records in MongoDB, we will improve the performance. I mean, just for requesting the. It's not comparable.
You cannot compare. You could compare Postgres with Oracle or relational database that enforce the ACID paradigm, but you cannot compare it to NoSQL that don't handle transaction. So yeah, no, we don't plan to.
And there are really big websites that are running with. Yeah, many major websites on the internet are running with Postgres as a backend. It's definitely one of the best performance database that you can get. So, and it's free and it's well known, and there's really no reason for us to switch. It's been proven many times.
And we also know PostgreSQL quite well, and we have some people in house that can tune also PostgreSQL for specific needs. And you know that Amazon is switching to PostgreSQL. I know that they didn't switch yet, but they are starting to switch from Oracle to Postgres.
Okay, thank you. So my question is there any plan for Odoo to support a mobile app development framework? In my own case, we have a couple of clinics, and we have programs that we send nurses to remote villages where there is no internet.
Okay.
Okay, and we give them tablets with Odoo installed. So we want to have a situation where they can, go collect medical records, and then when they come to place they have internet, they'll be able to sync it, to Odoo.
Yeah. So it's the question. I will answer the question in a more generic way. It's the should we support disconnected operation?
Yeah.
And so for very specific apps, we did it. Like for timesheet, we have a disconnected app. The point of sale can work in disconnected mode, but that's all. And we decided not to support it because it's a complex thing to support. When you have disconnected operation, you have conflict resolution, because if two persons touch the same document, then you have to handle the conflict. So we decided not to implement it because we think more and more in the future the connection will be better and better. So we rather not waste our time doing that, because it concerns only a small percentage of the users. So we know that we won't address everybody's need, and maybe 20% of the people would need the disconnected operation. Then I think they should implement something specific to their business need. But in generic in Odoo, we don't want to do some support disconnected operation, because I think it's too complex. And so no, there are no plans to make the mobile app of Odoo works with disconnected operation.
question for each of you is, what's your position on doing load balancing of queries to the database to have a pool of write queries going to a set of Postgres and load balancing the read?
No, that's my, look, I think Postgres scaled correctly maybe to 10,000 of users at the moment. But if we want to get in the 100,000 of users, we will need to do that. So what I plan to do one day is to mark HTTP request as read-only or read-write. So, for example, if you just display a web page, maybe you don't need to write on the database. And if you do that, you can say, okay, all the query for this request can be directed to a read-only replica of Postgres. So, but we didn't add the need yet, but maybe one day we will implement that. And it will allow us to scale much more because you will get read-only replica and you can have many of them, like maybe 10 read-only replica and one read-write master, and you would direct the request that need to write to the master one, and you could redirect the queries that only need to read the database to the other one. So yeah, we might do that. Tu vas ajouter quelque chose par rapport à ça? Okay. Does that answer your question?
Okay, so what is the state of the JavaScript framework that is actually now when the old framework is gonna come out? Is it gonna erase it? Replace it?
Yeah, the new, so they started to convert the Disqus app using it, and they started also to convert the point of sale to it. And I think after the Odoo experience, they will convert everything, so they will publish it very soon. I think now it's on a private repository. No, it's
public already.
It's public, so it's already published. But it's not yet used in V13. It's not yet used, but it will be. We will start to use it now. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Okay. He actually published it Monday.
What sort of testing do you do for the much larger databases that are naturally coming on board as bigger customers arrive? So it's not really a database question, simply a size of data. For example, we have many millions of records.
You mean testing the performance on huge data set?
Yes.
Yeah, we should ask Nicolas is not there. No?
Oh, apparently there might have been a talk.
Sorry?
Apparently there might have been a talk with Locus.
He did a talk on that.
Yeah, I think he did a talk on load performance and what kind of tools we use for that. Basically, we have some big databases that we use as benchmarks, such as the Odoo.com database, which is becoming big in terms of millions of records in many important tables like messages, customers, invoice lines, and so on. So that's already an interesting benchmark that we are kind of free to use, luckily. And then we are generating random data with scripts to make sure that we can benchmark, for instance, the new accounting and so on. So basically the standard load testing tools with some manual scripts to preload and generate a lot of sample data.
So you should probably look at the talk, but from a more business point of view, before we only had small customers, like Fabien said in his AMA. When we had a database with 200 users, we were wow, 200 users, and now I don't know why, but since this year we have plenty of big companies that come to us, and some of them, they already use Odoo. Sometimes I get called and we have a problem with the performance, and I ask them how many users you have, and they say 5,000, and 5,000. So it's becoming more and more important, the performance. That's the reason we put the accent on the new RM of V13, and it's something that we didn't do 1 or 2 years ago, but now we do stress test. And for example, we want to scale Odoo SH to make sure that we can support with a good SLA plenty of users. So we are working a lot on simulating loads, and we can play with, because Odoo SH uses some server from Google Cloud, and you can rent server with 96 CPU, so it's very funny to go on the, I can SSH on it and show you, you do top and you see the 96 CPU running. And we do our test on that hardware because that's the most CPU you can get on a machine, and we want to know on one machine how much people we can handle, that kind of stuff. So it's funny to do that, and we do it because now we have business people, companies that come with really big number of users, many transactions, big database that are huge also. So that's another problem. You have the number of users, but you have also the data set that is growing and growing. And that's the new challenge for Odoo, making sure that we can handle those big customers. Yeah.
Thank you very much. With those big data sets, is there some mechanism that you're looking into to clean up, prune those databases? Maybe some tables needs to be
like garbage collecting all stuff. Like for example, maybe previous year of accounting, and you would, we didn't do anything yet, but we did one time something with stock moves, I think in the past, but probably we will evaluate it, because also we now have customers that have been using Odoo since, let's say, V6, so they have maybe 6 years of accounting or 10 years of accounting. And at the moment when you check a balance, we still make the sum of everything. It still runs smoothly, but maybe in the future we will have temporary table with, aggregation with the previous year, so that when you look at the balance of your accounting, it would start from the beginning of the year instead of starting from the very beginning of the database. But at the moment, we don't have anything, Right.
I've been doing some bigger websites later on, and I've been having some issues with the speed and performance of the website.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any plans to incorporate different caching system? I've been in a talk with Rafael, we talked about this, but I understood that the caching system only handles some amount of requests for the QA, but for the web shop, we have things like different price lists being seen by users in the US, others in EU, and then you have stock quantity because it has to have a different response depending if you have stock or not. So this is a problem for us, and for static content it's simple. We can just use Nginx or some other caching system, but for the web shop itself, I understand in Python you might use memcached or something similar to store depending on a key, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, is there any plans to assess this issue?
I think we had a cache for static page before, but I think we removed it. No, we removed it because it's complex, because you have to choose: do you want something dynamic, and you need to render it for every person, or can you do static? I think on your use case, probably the easiest would be to decide yourself. What would be the key. That the page will be rendered differently based on, I don't know, the country, this, and that, and then you could easily define a ORM cache on the controller of that page, and you can handle it yourself.
We are thinking about
because
that.
when I did the cache, I did it for slash page, all the static page, but for people it didn't work because in their QWeb they had some dynamic stuff. So I don't want to enforce a cache where people would like to have dynamic stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe just a word. I don't know about Anthony, but for our needs, we notice definitely that speed is an issue with our website. Obviously, Odoo.com is running with Odoo, and it's also the same database that we use for normal operations. So it's a problem if the performance of the website impacts the rest of the system. So we know that QWeb is not very fast, and it can become a bottleneck because if you have a lot of crawlers looking at loading many pages, it quickly the CPU becomes the bottleneck. So personally, I want to invest time in optimizing the QWeb engine itself to make it a lot faster because it's really becoming a bottleneck. And the e-commerce is also another challenge because the price list calculation system currently is very slow, and there is a lot of room for improvement there. So these are different hot places in the website in a generic manner that well, at least personally, I want to work on because definitely we feel it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for price list, there is probably a big refactoring coming in the next version.
I have a question from my team. Okay. So I will just read it. Is it better for Odoo share server to put all database in their own separate cluster for controlling memory parameters in PostgreSQL? Does it depend on how large the customer is, or is it better to keep all customer database in the same cluster? And what does Odoo recommend for share server?
That's a big question. There are many talks that have been discussing these issues. It really depends, and the answer usually is do some load testing, some benchmarks to see what works best for you. Definitely we do both. In some cases, like in Odoo SH, we have a monolithic system with a database running on the same cluster or the same server as the Odoo front ends themselves. And it can scale quite high, as Anthony was saying, when you have a machine with 96 CPU cores, it actually scales pretty high. And we did the comparison between this and a load balanced system where we have the database on one side and then front-end servers, split front-end servers on the front. And we sized it so that there would be roughly the same number of CPU cores, but in one case it was a monolithic system, 96 cores, and the other case it was split with different front-ends in front and a separate database server. And basically we were getting the same numbers roughly in both cases. So it does scale as high in both cases. It has come with some differences in terms of flexibility, robustness, high availability, because if you split, definitely you have more security in terms of being able to replace the front ends one by one. There's less single point of failure. You can better fine tune and give more memory to the database server. You can also make sure that, for example, the front end servers that are really CPU bound, they get higher clock speeds in terms of CPU, and the database server that needs more parallelism maybe doesn't need as high clock speed, but just more cores. So you can specialize a little bit the roles of the different servers, so that gives you more power in this case. So it depends, and there are other constraints that you need to take into account, such as the latency between the different servers. So for instance, we had a customer trying to do that on Microsoft Azure, and I know that they had a lot of trouble because the latency between the different servers was very, very high. So it was impacting the speed of the system a lot. So in that case, if you have such constraints, then definitely you need to go monolithic. So it depends on what are the options in terms of hardware. But definitely the answer lies in doing benchmarks and load testing. Sorry, I'm not sure I understand. You want to, the customer wants to like not consider all their data during normal operations, but keep them for reporting?
active fields.
All right, so you would like have a criterion, a filter criterion, so you would say, oh, two old data won't be returned in the normal operational screen when you search and so on, but you could still consider it for reporting. I guess you could imagine having default filters. I don't think we plan to have any feature for that. But that doesn't work very well. But maybe you could, still use some of the standard features like filter rules, record rules, because you shouldn't use active for that. Active is really bad because active is not easy to index in the database. It's best to have something that can be easily clustered in the data files of Postgres. So typically a date field would be best because it's easy for the database to know, okay, all the records after this point, they're what I need to look through, and that makes the queries really fast. So maybe a date field would be really nice. And in the record rules, you can do something based with a time expression because the record rules are dynamic and you can have a evaluation of an expression that gives like the date 6 months before. And most objects have a create date, right? So maybe you could have default filter rules for most tables, and in the reporting sections, you just disable them by using a different parameter, or you run the reporting using the super user, and then you don't have the record rules active or something like that. Maybe, I don't know, different options are probably possible.
Yeah, that's on the roadmap for next year. Yeah, it's not really well defined, but it's something we want to do. Yeah.
Maybe do you have any solution for upgrade database without zero downtime for user? Maybe put database in read-only mode only for all users, and only one instance can upgrade database table.
You mean doing the migration without downtime for the user? We still don't know how to do that because it's a complex problem. Usually because we decided at Odoo not to give freedom to the developer to implement the best solution, and usually that means changing sometimes a lot the model and the database structure. So by doing this, yes, sometimes we need to change drastically, for example, account move line, or in the CRM. And when you have huge data set, when Postgres add a column to that table, or it needs to lock all the table. So even if we add some migration system that would work object by object, while the database is running live, you would still have that lock. And on huge table, it would take time. So I don't think zero downtime is possible, but maybe it's possible to do it, partially. But doing partially means that you would have half of the code that is running the old code and half of the code that is running the new code. So it's very complex. So I don't want to go there at the moment. We want to keep it simple, and our focus in migration here will be more to make everything working. So make sure that when people go through the migration script, everything is working perfectly after. That's the first challenge, We don't want to go into the challenge of zero downtime until we have solved the simple migration challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And maybe just one note about the performance of the upgrade system. We use it at Odoo for Odoo.com. So every few months you see there is a downtime that is planned, right? That's why, because we are doing the migration. But still, we need to keep that downtime to really the shortest period possible. And that's often a reason for doing a lot of optimization and work on the migration scripts themselves. Because, for instance, for version 13, there's the new accounting revamp. So that involves a lot of moving stuff inside the database tables. And initially, the accounting team worked on making a functionally correct migration script, except it was very slow, and we simulated the upgrade of Odoo.com, and it was taking more than 1 day just to. So imagine the downtime on Odoo.com. 1 day is just not an option. So in that case now, because we are getting our own database is getting big, we are forced to do the optimization of the upgrade script earlier. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, our database was kind of smallish compared to our biggest customers, so we weren't optimizing the scripts as much as we could. But now we have to do it to minimize the downtime. So now the scripts are optimized for the accounting of version 13 with our database with 2 million invoice lines. It takes only 2 hours, and we're still working on making it faster. So you see, we have to still optimize as much as possible the upgrade scripts. But because of all the constraints of having transactional data in an ERP system, it's quite different from being able to do like MongoDB or other kind of website where all the parts are kind of separate and you have different architectures. But it's still an ERP system with business data that needs to be consistent at all times. So that's a big constraint.
My question regarding Odoo SH. Our client uses Odoo SH and we have, for example, a problem when we need to modify Odoo configuration file. Is that a good way to modify it from shell and, for example, to add server-wide models and then restart Odoo SH service?
Tu sais pas, tu peux ça.
We're asking a friend.
Yeah. So you know that when you are running your server locally, for example, there is a configuration file. The same file is available on the Odoo SH, and you can modify it per instances. The thing we don't do yet is copy this configuration file between the databases, between the builds. But for the production, as the database and the container does not change, it works. So yes, you can add the server-wide modules within this configuration file.
Okay, thank you.
Can we do something to load more products quicker in a POS, point of sale?
Yes.
Because we have a 7 to 8,000 products, and then it's taking a long time to load the products in POS.
Actually, Donny did the optimization, so you can tell us.
Well, so we had the problem for a customer, so it was to load the partners for the point of sale and the products for the point of sale as well. And in V12, we did the patch on the read method to accelerate it much faster, like it was 6 times faster, I think, just by optimizing the Python. So playing with dict, iterating over dicts and things like that. So in 12, it's already faster than in 11, I think. And it was a stable patch that we did in 12 for this particular issue.
And if it's still not enough, it's part of our Odoo Enterprise service to improve performance issues if it's absolutely not reliable. So don't hesitate to submit a bug for that, and we work on it. But it shows that we already did a lot, so we have to check see if you use the latest patch.
Okay. So when we designed the point of sale, we designed it with 100,000 products in mind, you know, and that number comes from. I asked some guy who, you know, Carrefour supermarket here in Belgium, and asked, how many products do you have in shelves? And he told me, yeah, it's something like 100,000. So we had that in mind when we designed the point of sale. So it should work with that kind of product, because after the limit was in the memory of the browser, because you have everything in the memory of the browser. So how many products did you add? Combien? 8,000? 12,000? No, it should be quick. So if it's low, then open a ticket, because that's not a big number.
For the read patch I told you about, it was for 300,000 customers.
Right.
So yeah, the 12,000 should be fast.
Okay. Other question?
Questions on the new apps for V14?
Yeah.
What did who between the three of you break the Fabian's boiler? What will you break next year? And what can you expect as a new app for next version?
So there will be some good stuff, but you have to know that most of our work goes into improving the existing stuff. So polishing apps and making it more user-friendly. So that's where we spend the most of our time. But during the keynote, we like to present new feature, but it's actually the minority of our work. And so for next year, what to expect? We didn't do the roadmap yet. We will do it this month, probably. We will decide what are the next big things. But for me, website, probably, the website editor, making sure that somebody who's not very good at computer, like my brother-in-law, because he has a small shop, will be able to edit his website very easily, and that's not the case at the moment. You can do it, but it's not a good user experience, not as good as we wish it would be. So website, reporting, probably a lot of work in the reporting, like maybe a new BI engine. We don't know yet. What else will come? Fabien, you have an idea? Yeah, we will improve probably because social marketing, we release the apps, we will use it for ourselves, and probably there will be a lot of improvement. What else?
What we do well at Odoo is not to do one big thing, it's to do a sum of small details.
Yeah.
When you look at the release notes, yes, we showed you field service and e-learning and so on, but what's critical is that we released hundreds or thousands of small details that improve everywhere in the software. And that's where the key is. Also, it's difficult to answer what's the next big thing. The next big thing is to have hundreds of small things.
Oops. I show you the release notes, and it's impressive. Yeah, that's the release note, okay? I will scroll. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, and we are only at the third. So you see there is a lot of small things, but voila. See, that's the release note for V13. So yes, there were some new apps that we released, but the rest is in those small details in every apps. So it will be probably the same next year. Every time we say, oh, we think the functional coverage is complete, but each year we add some new apps, but it's only like 20% of the work. The 80% are in the existing apps.
I have a question about Odoo SH. In the previous version, when we used to use the submodule with the private repo in GitHub, it was not really working well.
What was not working well?
The submodule.
Submodules.
Private repo in GitHub, it was not working well. My second question, are you planning to include GitLab, Bitbucket, or it's not yet?
No, it's maybe, but it's not planned right now because as GitHub changed its pricing policy, it's now free for private repository if you have less than 5 users. So we don't see the need to switch to another platform. About submodule, I don't know. You have to ask Denis, because he did implement the submodule feature of Odoo SH. Yeah, he did everything.
Thank you. I think you will have to send a ticket because private submodules are supposed to work. Yeah. We made it work like at the beginning of Odoo SH. Yeah. Okay. It's only to add a new private submodule within the interface. It's true it doesn't work, but if you do it in command line, the developer way, it works. Yeah, it's just the easy way to add a private submodule, indeed it does not work. Okay, maybe we can do something about that.
Wait.
Hello, I'm a e-commerce question. We love the website that we've got. It's going really well. It's Odoo website version 11.
Yeah.
Probably, though, the biggest complaint we get from our customers is actually the search bar, oddly enough. It's a lack of fuzzy logic.
Yeah.
For example, if we call a product computer
Yeah.
and the customer searches computers, it will not appear.
Yeah, it's something we need to improve because the search is just a plain grep, you know, and yeah, we probably will do something. Yeah. No, not if you look for a product, you type the name of a product in the website on the e-commerce, you will not find the product if it's, you know, you make a small typo. And Postgres has a full text search mechanism that maybe we could use. Yeah. Ah.
Yeah, it's quite technical. We didn't publish it, but yes, there is an environment variable. Okay. So if you just type env within the command line, you will see it. But it's technical. We didn't publish it, but I think it could be public. Yes, of the container.
See. I mean, it's in Python. It would be OS environment. Okay, in that dictionary.
Do you get any help? Our client is a Spanish customer, and they want to sync their bank with Odoo automatically, but we didn't find any Spanish bank in the list. So, do we get any help from Odoo for that?
Spanish
yeah,
what?
Spanish.
Ah, you mean for synchronization?
Yeah, bank synchronization.
Yeah, bank synchronization. So we currently use 3 providers. One of them is Plaid, the other one is Yodlee, and the third one is Ponto, a Belgian one. So we try to cover as many banks as possible. But since that the PSD2 went into effect in September, there were some banks that were working that are not working anymore, and all the companies are you know, competing to add more banks. So I think it's just a matter of months. I think in 3 or 6 months you will have access to every bank in Europe with the PSD2. But at the moment, you know, everything is shaking in that world, and I think maybe this bank is not supported, but in 6 months you will get everything. Yeah. Maybe. We added some bank already. Because Plaid, you know, Plaid is an American company and they are coming in Europe and they will probably get very fast and implement a lot of bank. Yeah, we are also doing the process of being certified to do it ourselves. So maybe if we need, we will do it ourselves for some bank. We don't know yet. It's a new market, so we have to wait and see what will happen in this market. Yeah.
Okay, hi. In fact, I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
The first is, I would like to know why...
Can you put your mic?
I would like to know why someone presents us the Odoo client library.
Yeah.
And there was already a community tool that...
There are many of them.
Yeah, but in fact, it works. And
So
I would like to know why you...
we don't endorse any client library because for us we just have this API that is very easy to use in XML RPC or JSON RPC, and people make wrapper around it. It's okay, but we won't endorse any wrapper. Well, that's a choice because, for example, myself, I don't use any wrapper. I always write, you know, everything from the XML RPC lib or JSON RPC. Yeah. So I don't think there is an official client library. Voilà. Okay, thank you. Maybe one last question, if it's quick. Yeah.
My question about stock reordering rules. Many clients,
Stock reordering rules.
Yeah. About reordering rules, manufacturing combined with make from stock.
I didn't understand.
Combined rules, manufacturing and make to order. Oh, sorry, no.
Okay.
Get from stock with make to order.
Okay. Donc,
I know that issue in GitLab or GitHub, and
we didn't implement it yet.
Not.
Il dit reorder point en make to stock. Ah oui.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question. So you know us, you see our face, so don't hesitate to come to ask us any question if you have further question. Thank you, and see you next year.